All right, hey everyone, welcome. My name is Greg Pirtle. I'm the family minister here at Greenville Oaks, and we're in the middle of our Tech at Home campaign. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about boundaries. Not this past Sunday, not yesterday, but last week, Colin talked a little bit about boundaries in his sermon. And we wanted to come back to that. Last week was a little difficult for us to do this. I was traveling some, so glad to be here today. If you are doing your 24-hour Facebook fast or social media fast, then you won't be seeing this live. You can come back to it, but good for you already. If not, then remember, that's our challenge this week, is to take 24 hours off of social media and to replace that with prayers of gratitude. But today we're talking about boundaries, and to help us do that, we have our awesome children's minister, Miss Samantha Campbell. And so she is with us. Hey, Samantha.
How are you?
Her snacks behind her. So that's where the staff goes. Whenever we're hungry during the day, we go to her office, and actually we don't, but because those are for the kids.
You come for the candy.
We do come for the candy. You're right. So Samantha, this is a conversation that you and I have had. Oh yeah, you couldn't see the snacks back there. There we go. This is a conversation you and I have had several times over the last couple of years. And so just tell us a little bit about your experience. I mean, you have 3 kids of your own, and how this whole idea of boundaries and some of these best practices that you're going to share with us today came about.
So Jimmy and I have 3 kids, and one of them is in high school, and then I have 2 in middle school. So boy, girl, boy. And we kind of learned the hard way. We learned with our first one. He didn't have as many boundaries as the others had. And as he got his new phone and had new abilities to get online and talk to his friends, we weren't quite sure how we wanted to have boundaries at the time. So we learned the hard way. He kind of learned the hard way that we needed to have a few more just boundaries around using tech. My other 2 are a little bit different. My daughter, she has social media, but she kind of restricts herself, and she doesn't want to have any friends that talk unkindly or do things that they're not supposed to do. But then she also doesn't want to be the person that's always on her phone and not listening to her friends. So she kind of puts her own boundaries around her social media and her tech time. Then I have a younger son, a 6th grade, and he kind of gets a little more privileges a little earlier than the other 2, I guess, but he definitely puts his own boundaries on. He decided he was not ready for social media, so he has no social media. He does love his Fortnite, like most of the middle schoolers right now, even the high schoolers. He does love that, but we have to kind of work in our house to make sure that it works with the way that Jimmy and I like to parent and the way that we like to run our household. But
and like with most things parenting related, because our kids aren't on Facebook watching this, right? They're in other places. So we can admit that a lot of it is by trial and error, and we do learn, especially with our oldest kids. And so, one thing that's a little different for us is our girls, who are 13 and 10, do not have social media. But especially my oldest is pretty good. She's friends with your daughter, and they're both pretty good at putting their phones down and connecting with others around them. So that is good. And every kid is different, right? So my 13-year-old we have to parent her a little different than our 10-year-old. And I'm sure we'll find out more and more as they both become teenagers and get older. So anyway, and you mentioned the Fortnite thing. That's for a totally different time. So parents, that has been a huge question that we've had, and a question we've had often. We are going to discuss video games at some point on this. But for today, we're going to stick with these basic principles, maybe just a few basic tips for us when it comes to tools that we can use to set boundaries, ideas that we can use to set boundaries for our kids and ourselves when it comes to technology. So Sam, share some of those best practices with us.
So some of the things that we do at our house, and I kind of think that this is probably just a good baseline that you can have with your kids. And to be honest with you, I use a lot of these on myself. So we use iPhones at our house. I know that Androids are a little bit different, but the iPhones, this is what we're using right now. I always like to have my fingerprint in all of my kids' phones, just so that in case they do change their password and I don't happen to know what it is right then, I still can use my finger and I can still get into their phones. I do think it's important to always have their passwords for their phones, for their iClouds. If they have social media, then you should definitely have that as well. Some of the basic things that I think on your phone that are free, when you go into your settings, you can restrict things. So you can restrict explicit content. You can limit adult websites, music, apps. Everything can be restricted, and I do that for my kids. But I actually do it for my own phone as well, just because I don't want to search up things and maybe things I don't want to see come up or pop up. So I do that on my own phone, but I think those are kind of basics that you should definitely put into practice. And when you do the restrictions, you put a 4-digit passcode. I don't tell my kids what that is because I don't want them to be able to go in and change it. They can't buy within apps, in-app purchases, things like that. With the restrictions, I think it's also important to know that whenever your phone updates, those restrictions go away. So you kind of have to keep it updated and checked. So.
Yeah, that's good. This is helpful for me because I am really not very tech savvy. And so, I update my phone. I'm like, whatever. And so I'm glad you shared that. That was something I learned that's new today. So anyway, also want to remind everybody that feel free to post links. Or we have a link that was just posted in the comment section that goes to a tutorial for restrictions. But feel free to ask questions. Feel free to post as you go through this. We'll interact with you in the few minutes that we're here, or even after we're done. We'll add some comments. We'd love to interact. Like, we want this to be a conversation back and forth. So all right. So continue on. What are some other tips that you have for us?
I know a lot of the kids like YouTube, and I recently found out that you can actually put some restrictions on your YouTube as well. So we also have a link for that. So I think that's kind of important. So again, you're not just looking at one thing after another and then kind of go down a rabbit hole and find yourself in a place you don't want to be at. That's easy to do when you're kids and you're just pulling up kid things. So, but I do that also for myself. Something else that I think is really interesting is I think it's important to be able to see where my kids are. We're so busy and we're always going in all these different directions. It's nice for me to be able to see on some different apps like Find My Friends. I know your wife uses Find My Friends. And then we use Life 360. I just want to be able to see that, okay, my kids did make it to school, or, what time did they get there? Make sure that everything is okay. Everybody's in their places that they're supposed to be in. But Life 360 actually has a really cool thing that as my son is starting to be ready to drive, I kind of want to be able to see that he's okay and he's getting where he needs to go. But also it has a upgraded, like you have to pay a little bit more for it every month, but you can see crash detection on anybody in your circle. So I really like that.
I think that's one of those good tools that technology provides. It can be taken too far. We can use it to stalk our kids or others with it, and we don't want to do that. But it is good to know, when we have that availability to be able to know where other family members are, to know, especially the driving thing. My kids aren't there yet, but you're getting there. Your oldest is getting there. And so I can imagine that I know for me, that will be a very helpful tool just to be able to know, so that we can say, hey, don't text and drive. We'll check on where you are, Well,
and also they're driving with new drivers. So it's good for not just them, but also the drivers they're with. So I really like that one. There's different levels of restrictions you can put on your kids. As kids get their phones, my kids always got them in middle school as they started going off to schools that were further away from our house. Mm-hmm. And we started off using TeenSafe. You can kind of monitor what they're doing and what they're texting, pictures, things like that. It doesn't monitor any of the social media like Snapchat or Instagram or anything like that. So just have to kind of keep that in mind when you're deciding on some apps that you want. Another thing is we've used Force Field before. I've used Bark. Right now, one of my favorites, I know we've talked about this a lot, is the Disney Circle. That's my favorite one right now. And it is actually a filter that you put in your house. It's a little tower, and they cost about $100. So it does cost some upfront, but it'll filter anything that's on your Wi-Fi. So you can filter your Xbox, you can filter their phones, their iPads, anything that is connected to your Wi-Fi, you can put on a filter, and then you get to choose if you want to monitor it or not. And then if you want to put it in a with teen restrictions or kid restrictions or adult restrictions. I even use Disney Circle on myself. I give myself time restrictions, so I know. And so I only can use social media for so long, or I can't use it in the mornings, or I restrict things for myself, but also it's a good reminder for my kids sometimes that don't forget to do your chores, don't forget to do your homework. All of their Wi-Fi shuts down at once sometimes. And I think it's just a good thing that you can do. Sometimes you get a little out of hand and you can reel it back in with that. It's just a tool you can use.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, if we have the opportunity to use devices or use tools that can help us, especially, boundaries have to be developed. Most people don't, I won't say most people. Some people aren't good with boundaries, especially when it comes to technology. And so if that's a need that you have, then take advantage of these tools. And one question or one thing that I think of is, okay, so like Disney Circle, it works in your house, but when your kids head out of the house, or your husband heads out of the house, or whoever heads out of the house, now all of a sudden it just goes away? Or are there ways to keep that going when they're away?
That's a great question. So we've been using Circle Go as well. Okay. Now, it is an app that you have to pay for every month, but anything that's not on your Wi-Fi, it is connected to your Circle that's in your Wi-Fi in your house. But the Disney Go or the Circle Go, it still does the filtering and the monitoring while they're out and about and not on your Wi-Fi. Now, nothing is foolproof, because my kids are always willing to prove me wrong. So my oldest, I kept noticing that he kept dropping off of the Circle, and I finally went and asked him, I'm like, hey, what's going on? Why is this happening? I wonder what's going on with your phone. And he was like, I don't know. I was like, Colin. And he said, you're going to think I'm really smart, but like, you can just totally turn it off by doing this. So it's only as good as the user will let it be. But so they're good boundaries. The kids just have to make the choice, and you have to have the conversation of with them. They have to use it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that at the end, because sometimes we look for these 100% foolproof ways to protect our kids, and the truth is they're not out there. And so if we're not talking with our kids about technology and about some of the dangers online at age-appropriate conversations, if we're not talking with our kids about it, if we're just putting boundaries on it, but not telling them why it's important to have these boundaries, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to help them develop, because by putting these boundaries on there, we're trying to teach them how to use technology responsibly. And so and we're also trying to help them develop self-control. So with a 13 and 10-year-old, my boundaries may look one way, but as they get older, we'll release a little more slack. We'll give them a little more space. I talked with a mom recently who their kids did not have Snapchat. Well, son's about to be a senior in high school, and they decided to allow him to have Snapchat, because they didn't want him to go off to college never having used anything like that. They would rather have him in their house learning to use it responsibly with the parents there helping teach, rather than just send them off to college and now they can get whatever they want. So we have to think about that. We have to be wise in what we're doing. We want to have these discussions with our kids and talk with them about what's going on. And that's kind of what you were saying there at the end, is don't just leave it all to these devices. to these tips and tricks and tools that are out there, we are still the parents. And then beyond being a parent, with our own lives, we want to model healthy boundaries when it comes to technology and really life in general. So what kind of self-control do we have as adults? Are we using technology responsibly? These are some questions we have to ask ourselves as adults, as parents, as teachers, as leaders. So anyway, well, Sam, thank you so much for taking the time. Is there anything else that you want to share before we go?
I know that no, I know that nothing is foolproof, but these are just some of the fun things that we've been using and playing around with. My kids don't always love it, but they also, I think it keeps them kind of protected. So.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, I appreciate you sharing. Also want to remind you that we have our Tech at Home resources online. And so go to this link, check out what we have to offer. And again, post questions. We would love to hear from you. What are some other questions that you have? What are some topics you'd like for us to talk about? I have some cards that I have from a Bible class a couple months back, that we're going to be addressing some of those things as we go. And this campaign is going on for a couple of more Sundays, but we're going to continue the conversations. We're going to continue to push this into the summer and talk about it, because it's a really important discussion to have. So use those resources. And let me remind you, we will be back another time this week, but on Thursday, Greenville Oaks is going to go no social media. I am going to go no social media as my 24-hour fast from social media. I'm going to replace that with prayers of gratitude that day, and we want to invite you to do the same thing. So thank you, Sam, and you guys have a great day. Thanks for joining us, and let us hear your feedback. Bye, guys.
Yeah.